Receptionist. This one unfolds in a squash club in New York City. And squash is an obscure racket sport similar to racquetball. So the court is smaller, the rackets are a little longer, the ball's smaller, and it's a more challenging game than racquetball. I'm gonna say that. It's something that is played at a high level worldwide, and it's exciting, and there's some great athletes playing it. But this is close to home because for a period of time, starting in the late 70s, I also worked at a squash club in New York City, and I also was a squash professional. I taught lessons and this and that. It was interesting. It was an interesting period back there. Squash at the time was kind of a fashionable sport. You had a lot of celebrities in the club and people playing it. And, anyway, I won't name names, but there were definitely some celebrities that we taught and even hung around with a little bit in the club, bar, and restaurant, things like that. The bottom line is this guy, Hank, one of the pros, he comes in on a Monday morning, and there's a new front desk person being trained. You typically had a person at the desk, and they would, they'd pass out towels, or sometimes a few of them when it got busy, but they pass out towels. But they'd also were important for the pro because they handle all your lessons. They'd handle the schedules, they'd take the money, they'd handle the booking. So people called up, and they had a master sheet, and you just sort of went down and looked at the sheet. And, they were kind of your right hand person. It was nice. It was nice if you had a front desk person that you really, you got along with, and it worked out. It tended to make your day a lot smoother. But anyway, this woman, Shirley, is gone. But you get a sense that Hank had a little more going with Shirley at one point than maybe just, being his, kind of secretarial front desk, lesson recorder person. And so he doesn't like it. He's trying to figure out what happened. And so word gets around that she just abruptly quit. And now she's working in a law office in the neighborhood. This is the Upper East Side of Manhattan. So he can't take it. So at the end of the day, he calls her up, says, let's have a drink. I got to, find out what's going on. So she's a little reluctant, but she comes, and she finally, over a couple of drinks, she confides in him that there was a guy late at night when she was working night shifts that would hang around, and he scared her. He scared her. She was afraid he might start stalking her. And it turns out to be a guy. That guy was one of Hank's squash students, who Hank really liked. The guy was a pretty wealthy guy, lived on Long Island. And he had a house out in the Hamptons. And he invited Hank out to a couple of big bashes out there, and he treated Hank really well. Hank was, it wasn't just somebody that he taught. He thought of the guy as a friend. But the main thing was he couldn't see that side of his personality at all, that, he would be stalking somebody. And the woman said, well, it started innocently. He saw me drinking a Frappuccino. And so then every night when he'd come in, he'd bring me a Frappuccino, which was nice of him. But then he'd also hang around like he didn't have to be anywhere. And that was still okay. And so the guy said, well, what was the problem? She said, then he started calling me at home late. And it sounded like he'd been drinking. He was kind of making these weird little threats. And then my husband, got a little nervous. So I started bringing my husband here with me the last hour when I was finishing off, so that this guy, but anyway, it sort of starts off like that. And it doesn't really make sense to Hank, but he confronts the guy anyway, his student, Damon, on this. And then it sort of takes off from there. Okay. Receptionist. Hank walked into the squash club Monday morning, and a new front desk person was being trained. Shirley switch shifts or what? Hank asked Carol, the assistant manager. Shirley has taken a position in a law office, Carol said. Eileen, this is Hank, one of our pros. Eileen had black glasses and a small tattoo on her bare shoulder. You taught me once, she said. I did? Eileen nodded. About 5 years ago. I was going to Chapin, and we came here for P.E. Well, at least I didn't turn you off to the sport then, Hank said. But getting back to Shirley, I have to admit I didn't see that coming. Carol said, "There's a little more to it. Let me get Eileen situated." Hank grabbed a cup of coffee and sat on the couch in front of Court 1, watching Jenny DeLong and Megan Walker working a Boast Drive drop drill. They were Australian touring pros based in New York, and the club gave them free privileges so long as they played and practiced on the show courts. Hank was pretty sure Jenny and Megan were lesbians, but he still enjoyed checking out their rear ends as they stopped and stutter-stepped in reverse direction through their battery of drills. Carol sat down with him and said, "You know that guy Damon, right? I think Shirley quit because of him." "Wait a second, Damon Lackey, the guy I teach?" "Yes, there was some friction apparently." "Dang. Now that's hard to picture. He's the nicest guy in the world. Had me out for a weekend at his place on the island, took me fishing, the works." "Well, he did like to hang around the desk. Something creeps Shirley out is the way I'm hearing it." "Okay, let's hold it right there," Hank said. "Don't be circulating it like that to anyone else. Would you have Shirley's number?" Carol gave him a look. "I can get you the new work number," she said, "but you don't already have her cell?" Hank and Shirley had connected briefly a couple of years back, and he realized it hadn't been very discreet, and who was he kidding? "I might," he said. "Either way, I'll find out the story. Guarantee there's a logical reason she took the other job." "Makes sense to me," Carol said. "When someone's scaring you, you run away." "Give me a break," Hank said. When Shirley answered Gersten and Gersten, Hank said, "What the heck?" "Oh, hi," she said. "Hold on a minute." When she came back on, Hank said, "How about a drink at McEwen's for old time's sake?" And Shirley hesitated and then said, "Well, that sounded harmless enough, and she supposed she could." Hank was listening to one of Stan the bartender's jokes when Shirley showed up around 8 wearing navy blue sweats. "What, you just worked out?" Hank said. "The firm gives everyone a membership at New York Sports," Shirley said, "so I tried it." "No squash, though," Hank said. "You want to chase a ball, not stand on a dumb machine." "Hank, I had no choice," she said. "It got out of hand." "Is that right? Well, I've been teaching Damon for 3-4 years, and I know him a little bit socially as well." "What are you saying here?" "That one day he came in sipping a Frappuccino, and I made the mistake of saying that looks good. From then on, he brought me one most of the time, which was nice of him, but then he'd hover near the front desk, never needing to be anywhere else." "So, that's the way he is. Last Christmas, he gave me a $300 tip. Then he asked me to join him in West Palm Beach for a long weekend." "Ooh. You know you're married?" "He did. It didn't faze him." "I can kind of see his point, actually. That hasn't sidetracked you before." "You know what? You need to stop acting like a fraternity boy." "How's that going, by the way?" Hank said, "with Brad?" "That's sort of it. When I worked my late shift, I started having Brad come in and sit behind the desk the last couple hours until close to send a message. Damon still did his thing, though." "You mean hitting on you?" "Yes. Flirting, but hamming it up with Brad at the same time, rolling it into one. Brad enjoyed him. They talked sports." "So there you go. You're a sexy woman. Guy's human. What are you getting bent out of shape about?" "Okay, then the phone calls started. Late at night. He'd leave messages." "Whew, what kind of messages?" "Suggestive stuff. Graphic. He was drinking, maybe." Hank tried to process this. "How'd he get your number?" he said. Shirley said, "I gave it to him." "I know. Go ahead. Crucify me." "Not yet," Hank said. Thursday evening, Hank and Damon came off Court 4 and headed down the spiral staircase to the little club bar that overlooked 86th Street. I feel like it's starting to come together, Damon said. The league match Tuesday, we played R&T. I at least got a game off my guy. That's good, Hank said. You're still not grinding enough, though. The rally lasts 6 or 7 shots. You go for the cheap winner. I know, that's my Achilles heel. I feel like I'm programmed that way and can't alter it. That's a bunch of crap, Hank said. You just need to get in better shape, so playing a long point isn't a foreign experience. Okay, you're right. You've been doing those court sprints we went over? I even wrote them down, as I recall. No. Well, how about getting off your ass then? Or do you prefer to keep having this conversation while you don't win many matches? Jesus, I'm sorry, you seem awful worked up. I am, if you must know. The Shirley thing. It's been bugging me all week. Hey, I haven't seen Shirley, by the way, Damon said. She on vacation? Hank said, You know what, pal? I'm going to come out and say it. You've got a lot of nerve. Damon cringed, appearing genuinely confused. Come again? I spoke to Shirley. I got the straight dope. You crossed the line with her and you drove her out of here. Hank let it hang. If he lost the guy as a client, well, so be it. Damon didn't say anything. After a minute, Hank said, And the worst was hearing about the phone calls. Let me tell you something. I were married and you pulled that on my wife, your jaw might be wired back together now. What phone calls? Damon said. Oh, so now you're taking the 5th. That figures. Damon said, Man, I'm not following you. I've called Brad a few times. We've been playing a little golf. I met him at the front desk. The ones to Shirley, late at night, those calls. Huh? Ah, Jesus. I don't have Shirley's cell, Damon said. It was never like that. Yes, I put the moves on it first because she seemed to want me to. Weird thing then, I asked her to go to Florida, and for a few days she was all in. Then she said she was having second thoughts. I said, me? She said no, she was wrestling with gay thoughts, if you can believe that, which was part of why her marriage was on the rocks, was what she said. You're kidding, Hank said. She was just feeding you a line, obviously. But he was running his own little fling with Shirley back through his head, thinking, is it possible there were tendencies I didn't pick up? I don't know, Damon said. She seemed matter-of-fact about it, that she wanted to experience a relationship with a woman, plain and simple. Well, let's forget that part for now, Hank said. Why'd you keep harassing her? I didn't. Like I said, I became friendly with Brad, and I felt bad that I hit on her. Plus, they seemed to be enjoying each other, not like two people on the rocks. Hank took a minute and said, okay, whatever. Now you got me mixed up, frankly. Let me ask you one simple question then, bud. How come she doesn't work here anymore? I have no idea, Damon said. First I've heard of this. If I'm not overstepping, though, why are you so interested? Hank said, I'm not sure. I guess I don't have a great answer. You have that number for Brad, though? Damon shook his head and dug the number out of his phone. He said, You've hooked up with her, right? Pardon my French, but it's pretty clear she's still leading you around by your dick. Hank figured one person who might know something was Spike. Spike got thrown out of the club twice last year, first as a pro and the second time as a player, in the same morning round robin that he used to run. The first time Spike punched out a husband of one of the round robin participants, and the second time he smacked the same guy over the head with a racket to stop that guy from clocking another player. Before he got fired, Spike had managed to get it on with about half the round robin women, largely, Hank felt, because of the New Zealand accent. Hank didn't want to picture it, but it was likely there'd been some dealings with Shirley as well. Aye, mate. It's good to hear your voice, Spike said from Florida. He'd resurfaced at a resort in the Keys, having apparently finessed his way into a tennis teaching job just as he had the squash job at Hank's Club in New York not being very good at either sport. Hank said, "Listen, there's a situation up here. Shirley, the front desk gal, has left, and I'm getting mixed signals as to why. You know anything about that?" Spike said, "Let me get my bearings a moment. Ah, yes, Shirley, with the porcelain skin and the hair up, and the intrigue. Pretty sure you cracked the code, though, somewhere along the way," Hank said. "Can't say that I've been in touch with her," Spike said. "What's the big to-do?" "She told me she got driven out by a member who started stalking her. I confronted the guy, and he said that's ridiculous, and I think I believe him. There's also the part about her maybe being a lesbian." "What?" Spike said. "What the hell?" "You ever notice anything along those lines?" "Not in a million years," Spike said. "That's absurd." "I thought so too, but I'm going to poke around a little bit out of curiosity." "Good idea," Spike said. "Now I feel like I should have a look myself. I do have some frequent flyer miles sitting idle at the moment." "You can just take off? It doesn't affect anything?" "Pretty much, yes." "They figured out you don't know what you're doing, right?" "That doesn't matter so much. The bloke that hired me said simply feed them balls and tell them that's the way, just give it a bit more shoulder rotation and so forth. The problem is it's too damn hot. No one wants to play tennis. I spend most of the day in the air conditioning watching the Food Channel." Megan, one of the Australian touring pros, had been asking Hank for a while to hit some. This seemed like an okay time because he could ask a few questions. Hank was 37, 6 years retired off the pro tour, but he kept himself fit and hadn't slowed down much and was confident he could still handle any female pro. Today with Megan, he got on the tee and volleyed everything and kept the ball deep and the pace fast, and Megan spent most of the time defending. They played 5 games and Hank won them all comfortably. The two of them playing each other was a novelty apparently, and a crowd had gathered outside court 1, though as soon as they finished, everyone left. Hank refilled Megan's water bottle and they sat on the couch, and Hank said, "Not to pry, but you're a gay individual, right?" Megan reacted as casually as if he were asking what her world ranking was. "That I am," she said, "though I seldom volunteer it up front, as I'm still a bit shy about the topic with strangers. In the States, it is less complicated, though." Hank looked around and lowered his voice. "What about men? Do you ever experience them?" "Oh, goodness, yes. In fact, I was nearly married to a boyfriend from university." "Oh," Hank said. He lowered his voice even more. "Well, this is over the top then, so feel free to shut me down. But were you satisfied in those situations?" "Not wholly," Megan said, "and that was the thing of it. I knew there was something else out there for me. I was drawn to it. It felt automatic." Hank was dying to clarify if she meant mentally or physically or both regarding the satisfaction, but he was afraid to press the issue. "The boyfriend, the one you almost married," he said. "Doesn't that slap him in the face?" "Breaking up with him, you mean?" "No, more like him figuring he's doing the job and then you turning his world upside down." "I'll admit it was something he wrestled with for some time," Megan said. "I see," Hank said. "I thank you for your insight. And one thing I noticed out there, you were hitting too many cross courts from behind. You were opening up the court." "Aye, you're right," Megan said. "I must keep in mind who my opponent is. With the girls, they're more effective, clearly." The next Monday, when Hank walked in around 9, there was Shirley back behind the front desk, talking to Carol. Hank did a double take. "What happened to Eileen?" he said, among other things. "Eileen's heart wasn't in it," Carol said. "So," Shirley said, "Carol called, and frankly, the law office gig, I realized it was kind of dry." "More social interaction here, I'll give you that," Hank said. Shirley nodded and the phone rang and she got back to business. Hank went outside on 86th Street and called Spike. I know, Spike said. I straightened it out. You came up? Actually, Shirley came down. I was able to transfer my miles. Oh. What'd you straighten out, actually? The guy who was calling her, leaving the late night messages, that part she was okay with. She was? Uh-huh. The husband, though, he was insecure. He had her saying she was gay. Some lesbian at the club got wind of it and came on to her big time. That sent her packing. Jeez, Hank said. Don't I know it? What I told her, it happens again, tell them fuck off is all. She liked that. I gotta absorb this, Hank said. So if I'm hearing you right, she's still a flaming heterosexual. Pretty damn sure I did catch myself addressing the matter when we were, Yeah, well, that's good to hear, actually. Still probably something to monitor, Spike said. Enjoy the food channel, Hank said, and he went back in the club. Jenny and Megan were drinking coffee on the couch outside Court 1, getting ready for their morning drills, and Hank sat down with them. Shirley looked up, and she gave the three of them a smile and a little wave.